Well, how's that? I brought some books. I'm a historian of Charlotte. People think Charlotte has no history. And so I brought a variety of books about Charlotte, Charlotte history, and I'll pass these around. And most of you are going to go, hey, wow, books, but maybe somebody take a picture of a cover and get them out of the library or whatever. And then I want to recommend There Is No Place for Us Working and Homeless in America. So I think this is going to win the Pulitzer this year. It's going to do pretty well anyway. So let me pass that around as well. And now you can return to your regularly scheduled program.
Okay, I'm going to open us in prayer so that I can officially introduce our guest speaker. Will you all pray with me, please? Holy One, you make home among us long before we ever build one. Gather us now in your sheltering grace. As the first freezing temperatures settle over our city this week, we feel in our bones how precious warmth and shelter truly are. Open our eyes to the stories held in these streets, the ones paved with struggle, the ones humming with resilience, the ones we've not yet learned how to hear. And as we listen, give us a spirit that is curious and humble, that our hearts are willing to move. Bless Tom as he shares the wealth of his wisdom, and bless this community as we seek understanding. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. So if you've been coming here for a couple of weeks now, at this point you already well know who this is because Tom Hanchett, our finale speaker of this series, has actually come to see all of our other speakers, which is really kind. But Tom is a beloved historian who partners closely with neighborhood groups across the city of Charlotte. He was educated at Cornell, the University of Chicago, UNC Chapel Hill, and is the author of the foundational history Sorting Out the New South City, and most recently Affordable Housing in Charlotte. And as he said, he has all of those books here. So if you're interested, we hope you'll take a look. Charlotte Magazine called Tom Charlotte's Dr. History and honored him as Charlatan of the Year. So that is a really awesome honor. Wow. What year was that? That's pretty wild.
2015.
2015. So we're very privileged to have Tom here, and we're privileged that Tom has also been in discussion with us for the past few weeks, so he has quite a bit of context on what you've already heard, and is going to weave that into this discussion so we can take it even further today. For those who have not attended all of them yet, we've been looking at the issue of homelessness in Charlotte. We first heard from Liz Clayson-Kelly of Roof Above, and then Laura Belcher of Habitat. So we've kind of investigated the issue of chronic homelessness as well as the pathway to home ownership. And now Tom is going to take us through a consideration of housing affordability and history in our particular location. So, Tom, when we talk about affordable, what does that actually mean? Isn't that kind of a relative term?
That is the first question that I always get. And I'm going to be talking about rental housing tonight, which is another piece of the puzzle. So I'll duplicate a few things, particularly things that I heard from Laura Belcher. She had some wonderful facts and figures, which I hope I know. But ask questions, make comments. I will learn more from you than you will learn from me, as long as you put your hand up and say something. I brought along a bunch of slides, and I can talk about the history of affordable housing. I can talk about where we are now. I can talk about what seems to be happening in Washington that nobody really knows. But like I say, the first question I always get is, so what's affordable? And there are two pieces to that. And many of you who've been following along, this will not come as a surprise, but there might be a few of you that haven't thought about this. One is that affordable means that it costs you, your home expense costs you no more than 30% of your income. That's your gross income before taxes. Housing expense could be your home payment if you're a homeowner or a mortgage owner, could be your rental payment, would be your utilities. If you've rented anything recently, you'll notice there are all these fees. Fees for having a car, fees for having a dog, fees for not having a dog, move-in fees, move-out fees, all of that is counted in that. So it's not an official figure that anybody puts together, but it's been around for a long time, kind of a rule of thumb. So that's part of the answer, and the other part of the answer is affordable for whom? And for this, this is where I began my learning, because this is not something that I knew before I launched into the book project. Start with the concept of area median income. I always have to remember median, average, all of that stuff. Median is right in the middle of the people who have an income. That middle person is the median income. Affordable housing usually is for people who are below the median income. And there are two price points that I talk a lot about in the book. And one of them is what most of us, including me, I think, immediately what comes to mind when you talk about the need for affordability, that's folks who are making 30% of area median income. Folks who are not making a lot of money. They are people who we deal with every day, who work with us, for us, custodial workers, food service workers, child care workers, bus drivers, disabled people, seniors on Social Security. And they're almost all, if they're in this kind of housing, are working or are caring for another person. So 30% AMI is what we think of, but there's also folks who are making 60% of AMI who increasingly are finding it hard to have a home. And that's kind of scary, because those are kind of my people. Teachers, nurses, social workers, first responders. Did this talk for another major church in Charlotte, and the minister who was there said, yeah, and junior clergy at our church. So, wow, the hospitality managers, all of these people who are around us, who are not scary people, because we know them, we deal with them, but they're having a hard time finding a place to live. So those are percentages. What does that mean in actual real numbers? Here is a Charlotte family of two in 2025. The area median income is much higher than you probably think. It's pretty close to $90,000 a year. That seems like a lot, right? Many of us who are retired, such as me, never made $90,000. And that was one of the things that Laura Belcher talked about from Habitat. She said that figure in the last, I think, 5 years has gone up 68%. So the area median income has gone up 68%. She said, but what it costs Habitat to build a house has gone up 250%. And so that can seem like a lot of money. If you take 60% of that, you end up with a monthly income of $53,900. That's more than a CMS teacher, most CMS teachers make. It means that you can afford about $1,350 a month in rent. Anybody's looked for an apartment recently, found one for around $1,300? Nope. If you are 30% of AMI, that means you're making less than $30,000. That means you're looking for an apartment at $740 a month. Even if you have a housemate, it's almost impossible to find that. And it's not just me talking about that. This is from the Charlotte Observer 2022. 1% of apartments in Mecklenburg County, and this is 3 years ago now, are going for under $1,000. I live on Central Avenue. Central Avenue used to be the cheap apartment corridor. It was a wonderful thing. It's one of the reasons why I live there. When I was very young, that's what I needed coming out of college. And stuff doesn't exist anymore. And so that's a kind of wake-up call for me, for sure.
All right. Well, thanks for putting that into context for us. It's not affordable, and affordable for whom is not what I think most, at least not what I grew up understanding, like housing was for. So this is eye-opening. Can you talk to us a little bit about the top structures that are forcing Charlotte's affordability to become out of reach for more people?
Nobody's really figured that out. I will put out several different possibilities, and I think all of them are actually true, and I think all of them interact. Have folks run across a book called Abundance by Ezra Klein and some other really good looking author, I'm sure? Abundance argues that we, and these are a bunch of self professed liberals, who say that we as a society have put in too many regulations and it makes it really hard to build houses. And there is definitely some truth to that. The construction of new houses has been slower than the population growth for at least the last 20 years or so, maybe since the turn of the last century, since 2000. And so that's a part of it. We're not building enough houses. Another, which you have probably read about, again, this is something that folks often ask me, corporate ownership of single family homes. And I would say as well of rental housing. There are new kinds of funds that are new to me, private equity, hedge funds, that are basically big pots of money. They have some of their own money involved. They borrow a lot of money, and they can spend. The one that I heard was there's a group working along Central Avenue, and this is what was told to me, not sure, they have $1 billion to spend on Central Avenue. Dang, no wonder the prices are going up on Central Avenue. And so that's another piece. A third piece, which strikes me, is, and this is going to sound weird, in the last 15 years or so, since the 2008 recession, we have actually had abnormally low interest rates. Now, you're looking at me like I'm crazy because we complain about high interest rates, but that's because a lot of people who've grown up in that period just assume that's always the way it was. When I grew up in the 20th century, feels weird saying that, when I grew up in the 20th century, a mortgage cost 6%, 6.5%, 7%, occasionally much more than that. And what happened in American society is that in 2008, when the Great Recession happened, the Federal Reserve does what it has done for a number of years, which is decrease interest rates. When you decrease interest rates, anybody who can borrow money rushes out, borrows money because it's a bargain, and they start doing development. They buy houses, they buy real estate, and what this does is bid up the price of real estate. You have lots of dollars chasing whatever real estate exists, and normally that's a stimulus, and then the Federal Reserve puts the interest rates back where they were. They did not do that after 2008. They cut them again, and 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 then came COVID, and they cut them again, and they cut them again. In the early 2020s, you could refinance your house for 3%, a 3% mortgage, a 2.5% mortgage. Wow. And that's great, right, if you qualify for a mortgage. 40% of us are renters. And some of that is out of choice, but for a lot of us, we can't qualify for a mortgage. And that means that the folks who got those cheap mortgages are getting a tremendous subsidy. And that's part of what has been driving the real estate prices up. So what we're doing is we're losing what they call NOAA. Folks run into NOAA. This is not the guy with the big boat. This is naturally occurring affordable housing, which has always been the main way that people who need affordable housing, they don't get subsidies. Some people do, but most people, go out and find an old house or an old apartment, and all of a sudden those things are costed what you see up there.
So I'm glad you brought up NOAA. I had a few questions on that piece. Could you help us understand why NOAA access homes are decreasing so rapidly in Charlotte?
Well, part of it is that the stuff that I talked about. Let me start out by talking about how ubiquitous, there's a good word, that kind of housing used to be. we feel like, I do, that the world has always been the way it's been during my lifetime. And that's not true when it comes to rental housing. It used to be, until zoning hit in the late 40s, which is very late, that rental housing was in every neighborhood. Myers Park, if you go to the old parts of Myers Park, walk around and you'll see duplexes, you'll see small apartment buildings. This is Plaza Midwood, which was an upper middle class neighborhood. And take a look there, and can you see the quadruplex, the 4-unit apartment? On the other end of the block, can you see the duplex? It's a brick building, looks like a house, but it's actually a duplex. In between are 2 single-family houses that by the time I moved to that block, I literally live on the other side of that block, all of that was rental housing. Today, none of it is rental housing, not one bit. And so that is a way we've lost Noah as cities have become more desirable, as old buildings have become more desirable, as more people move to Charlotte. That's part of the story as well. And so knowing this, that's where I start with the book, because this doesn't look scary. This is a good neighborhood. I can testify to that because I live in it. Prices are going up. Having that mix of housing has not been a detriment. And so that's a thing. We could do that in any neighborhood, that kind of mixture. And that really opened a mental door for me.
Are there policy tools that would protect or regulate some of this decrease in NOAA housing that we're not putting to use in Charlotte?
Yeah, and hang on to that question. I'll come back to it later on because I've got some slides at the end about a big thing that we could try to do. One thing that's going on right now is there is a group in Charlotte, for-profit group called Ascent Capital. Mark Etheridge, that name mean anything to folks? If you're my age, you know Mark Etheridge, the dad, who worked as a journalist. This is Mark Etheridge, the younger, who's a real estate developer, and he has put together a number of funds, dedicated funds. The buy-in is $500,000. Big corporations, do-good folks will buy a stake in a fund. When the fund is fully subscribed, he more or less guarantees, I think, an 8% return. That's pretty good. And then takes that money and buys NOAA housing and fixes it up so it's a good place to live. But unlike the developers who are working their way down Central Avenue, they buy up stuff, they put in granite countertops, and they double the rent. And Ascent Capital, Mark Etheridge, keeps the rent low. And in my neighborhood, if you know Central Avenue, Pepper Tree is an apartment development that was done in the 80s, very near Manolo's Bakery. That's one. If you go up and down Eastway, Kilbourne, Hill Rock Estates, both of those were done in partnership with Atrium. And so there's a lot of stuff brewing. But it's great. We got to keep doing it. But it's one project at a time. And it takes a lot of effort, and there's often pushback. There hasn't been for those particular projects. And so to foreshadow where we might go with this evening, I think finding something bigger, a bigger tool than that kind of tool would be a good thing to be thinking about.
Well, before we start looking into the future, since we have a historian with us, I would like to kind of dig in a little bit to some of the knowledge that you have about our city. How did the early public housing in Charlotte work, and what lessons might we recover from its successes and failures?
Cool. Ask a historian a history question. Yes, I'd be happy to answer that. Let me start out with NOAA for people who are not wealthy. I was showing you a middle class, upper middle class neighborhood, Plaza Midwood. By the way, Dilworth is the same way. Go down Kingston Avenue, go down Woodlawn Avenue on the other side. Is it Woodlawn on the other side? Worthington on the other side. And you'll see that same mixture. And so Myers Park, Dilworth, Plaza Midwood. But folks who were at the bottom of the economic ladder might not be in those neighborhoods, they might be near those neighborhoods. For instance, if you're in Dilworth on East Boulevard, at South Boulevard, and you go a couple blocks, there's Mr. K's. Behind Mr. K's is the old Atherton Mill Village, and there's only one or two houses still there. But if you look here on the lower right, that is a 1908 photograph of the Atherton Mill Village. And that is by one of the most important photographers in the fight against child labor, better labor conditions and such. And that was a white job working in textile mills. The Atherton Mill is still there, hidden away behind the new developments. And so those were the lowest blue-collar paid white folks. The other photograph is Brooklyn. Brooklyn was a black neighborhood. It's where the government center is. It's where the new medical college is. It's where the NASCAR Hall of Fame is. Huge space. And folks who worked there worked black jobs, many different kinds. But those were also at the bottom of the economic ladder. And what you're looking at there is a street that was laid out for them. The people who owned the properties were protected by segregation in their part of the city. They were never going to live in that neighborhood. Their kids were never going to play on that sidewalk. The houses haven't been painted. There's no sidewalks. And that segregation kind of enabled that. The thing that really got my attention when I understood that was that they did not include indoor bathrooms. People went to outhouses, privies, dig a hole in the ground, put a wooden seat over it. And the way that ended was a concerted campaign by women. Women in the women's club across the street here. Women were not in government. They were not elected officials because women's place is in the home. Well, this is home, you know. We got to figure out this. And so there's a long period, 20s, 30s, 40s, of women campaigning for better housing laws. And eventually, they get a partnership with the real estate leaders who initially fought the notion of spending money on indoor plumbing. That's socialism. Government shouldn't require that. And besides, the poor people, they don't really want indoor plumbing. And it'll make the houses too expensive. And the women just kind of pushed through that. In 1947, there was a polio epidemic. Shut down the whole town. Kids could not go to church school. In the summer, it was awful. And out of that, the real estate leaders who had been fighting this turned it all around. They said, we demand that there be indoor plumbing, that there be window screens on the windows so that the flies don't get in and cause disease. And so that was a major step forward in the 40s. A thing that the women succeeded in doing was getting the menfolk to pay attention to Franklin Roosevelt's offer of money for public housing. And that's what you're looking at there. The notion that the private market wasn't doing it, they never had done a good job of creating safe, sanitary housing for people at the bottom of the economic ladder. Let's give the government a shot. And so public housing in America begins in the late 1930s. Our first two developments, one black, one white, opened in 1940. Some of you know Piedmont Courts, used to be off Central Avenue. Some of you know Fairview Homes, used to be off of Statesville Avenue. And so that's the beginning of public housing. The problem with public housing was that it was done cheaply at the edge of town to save taxpayers money. Where's the real estate the cheapest? Well, it's out there. And if you live out there, how do you get to your job? How do you get to your church? How do you get to your school? All of that. And so the beginnings of public housing, it was better. It had indoor plumbing. It had roofs that work. It had window screens so that the mosquitoes and stuff didn't come in and cause polio. But we still, I think today, when you hear the term affordable housing, you think that. And people say NIMBY. Have you heard NIMBY? Not in my backyard. And I think that's what they've got in their head.
Well, I think I've asked a whole bunch of questions, and some folks here are excited to ask you questions. So I'll take a pause and see what questions do you guys have for Tom?
Questions or comments or additions or, yeah. Let me bring the microphone up so other people can hear. So I can too. I'm a little deaf, so if I miss something, let me know.
So I read a couple days ago that, and they just listed that this problem is ubiquitous across America now. We've focused and think that it's because of our growth, so in your opinion, should we be looking for a bigger, more global solution or bigger help, or is it still a local thing?
Where I ended up in the book was I do think we need a bigger solution. And again, let me put you off on that until we get a little bit further along, because I've got some slides that illustrate that. But this problem of rising real estate prices and lack of affordable housing plagues even cities that are not growing. Roanoke, Virginia, which has no growth in the last 20 years, prices are going up. Rockford, Illinois, no growth in the last 20 years, prices are going up. I spent 3 years in Youngstown, Ohio. Population's going down, but prices are going up. And so that's a support for my interest rate theory, but it also argues that as important it is to do stuff locally, got to do something, because there are people homeless right now. Waiting for the perfect answer is not it, but looking for a big answer might be important.
One of the more interesting statistics that I've seen, I think it's talking about Mississippi, has the lowest rates of homelessness and also some of the lowest rates of income. Is there any correlation there that Charlotte?
I think what's going on in Mississippi, and I really don't know, is that Mississippi has experienced intense poverty for a very long time. And so there, just from my driving around Mississippi, there is a gracious plenty of substandard housing that I'm sure is relatively affordable. And so that may be what we're seeing in a place like that. Here, we're adding 170 people a day. That's what I heard most recently. That's net. That's not just the people coming in, but that's people coming in minus people going out. And so again, something bigger, doing things one at a time is great, but more than that would be great too. Did I see a hand over here? Nope. I saw a hand back there.
A few hands.
Oh, okay.
We'll do
Great.
them.
Yes. How we stop it?
That question. For
Okay. That she had seen information that Charlotte and Austin are two of the cities where the corporate buyers of real estate are working the hardest. And I think that's partly because we keep showing up on those lists of fastest growing cities. Both Charlotte and Austin are among the faster growing cities in the United States every year. And we are the people who are mostly bidding things up. There are some of them who are individual people, go out and buy an old house, tear it down, build a new house. But a lot of them are people in New York or Dubai or someplace, and we pop up on a spreadsheet, and they've got a couple of billions to spend today, and whoop, there you go. Yes, I saw one in the back. Yeah. Tax-exempt bonds for teacher housing. There is an effort here with the school board, and they have some extra land near Garinger High School. They're working through the maze of regulations about what a school board can and can't do. But we do have, of course, the housing bonds that get voted on every 2 years. Most recently, that figure that we voted yes for, yay us, was $100 million, which sounds like a lot of money. But again, when you look at the scale of the problem, it's not. So that would be a great, one of the things that could happen out of this, out of these 3 lectures, 3 conversations, is for one or two of you to say, this is not right. And dig in and talk with other people and start building a coalition. So that might be the entry point for that. Yeah, in the back. Right. Good. Yeah, I wrote this book about affordable housing in Charlotte, looking particularly at garden variety rental housing for low income folks. And so those kind of specialty things are part of the mix. There's a program that's called Section 202. I have all these numbers in my head. I don't know what to do with them. That was passed in 1959, which is where the senior citizen high rises that pop up every once in a while, that's where they come from. And 202 is still around. And so if your church wanted to build some senior housing, one of the ways that they could do that is to talk with housing consultants and see if you can get a 202, Section 202 allocation. And so that is a possibility. There's also supportive housing. Some of you know about Moore Place. Folks who had previously been homeless. It's really hard to get your life together when you can't even keep your medications with you because you're getting kicked out under that bridge and pushed over to this bridge. And so that's part of that. Folks who may appear to have disabilities, sometimes you just let them sleep for a couple of weeks and they feel much better. And so that's another approach that folks are doing in Charlotte. And again, we do it. What we're doing is good. What we need to do is more.
I want to do a plug for Forest Point, one of the roof above sites, a very new roof above site, and maybe the least known amongst this congregation because it's so new, is specifically for senior adults who are chronically unhoused. And you have an opportunity on Sunday to come and support a barbecue and a new grill with them. So check out some senior permanent housing from roof above.
And I think I see a hand from Susan Jernigan. Susan Jernigan, I got to brag on her. She was one of the pioneering women in elected office here, one of the pioneering women to have a home in Dilworth. Really? People own homes in Dilworth? And she's still doing it, and she's still part of the church. Well, there you go. You can move back this evening, but go ahead. Yes. What I'm talking about is happening in many first world countries, Canada, UK, and to me that it argues for any of the big picture causes. I think that the way the world works with money moving around, if one place cuts interest rates, the money flows there, and so I think that supports. But anyway, it's not just us, and that's another reason why we need to be looking for a big solution. Let me before we leave public housing altogether, I was amazed to find that there is a law passed in 1998 called the Faircloth Amendment. Locke Faircloth was a very conservative senator from North Carolina who did not like public housing or any other giveaways to poor people, and he managed to get the rest of the legislators in Washington to agree to a cap on public housing. However much there was in 1998, there ain't going to be any more. And of course, population's going up, need is going up. What it means to try and buy a house or rent a house at 60% AMI. And so I've had people tell me, well, we just need more public housing. We do, but we need to change that law.
I think you've got more questions.
Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah, it comes back to it's a bigger problem than the tools we currently have. One thing that's been floated is a minimum income for everyone. And when I first heard that, I went, yeah, right. And then Andrew Yang ran on that in the last election and got a fair amount of traction. Again, it seems like one of those things that is totally un-American, and how could we ever do that? But we got people living under bridges, and yeah, it isn't just me. There are more people with cardboard signs, and they're in more parts of our city than they used to be. And so, again, maybe that's the solution. For sure, the let's see if I've got a handy dandy graph here. Let me go to my handy dandy graph. There's the handy dandy graph. Nope, here's the handy dandy graph. Come on, graph. Doggone it.
There you go.
There we go. Alrighty. So this is real estate prices since 2008, and this is apartment rent going up, going up, going up, going up. Here's COVID in 2020 where they cut the things to almost nothing, like that. So you can see apartment rent much more than doubling in the last 15 years. Y'all know what minimum wage has done in the last 15 years? Yeah. And even corporations say, well, we've got a minimum wage for all across our employees of $20 an hour. Well, for it to catch up, it needs to be around $28 an hour. That's one thing. And the other is a lot of people, a lot of corporations and local government are outsourcing stuff. And so I think I'm going to tell the truth here. At the airport controls certain jobs, but things like baggage handlers and plane cleaners are employed by a contractor. And the airport may or may not have a minimum wage. I just frankly don't know. But the notion that the contractors don't have to be part of that in order to be able to claim this is something to be watching for. Cool. Yeah. That's a thing that I think is good. We have moved from zoning that purely kept them out of our neighborhood. That's kind of what zoning was invented for, and there are prettier ways of saying that, but that's kind of the way it was, to a notion that having mixtures in neighborhoods is a good thing. And so now, by right, in the last 10 years, I think you can build an accessory dwelling unit, what they used to call a mother-in-law apartment. We actually did that at our house on the plaza. We rent that space to a teacher for CMS and charge a little bit less than market rent. And so that, I think that's helping a little bit. You now, under the newest zoning, can build duplexes and triplexes on corner lots. I think that's helping. But because we have this tremendously overheated real estate market, when they build a new triplex on the corner, they're not triplex, they're duets. Have you noticed duets cost at least $1 million a side? And so eventually that's going to trickle down probably and make for a better mixture of opportunities. But right now, not so much. Anybody else?
More.
Yeah, one or two. And I got a whole bunch more slides. So when you get tired, let me know. I think I saw a hand here. Okay.
Well, I just wondered if you see, like, what you could imagine in like 10 years. I think so many people just think, how will their children ever buy a house? And it just does feel like with where prices are, what is going to happen in 10 years when?
I can imagine a situation in which we are like parts of Europe were 500 years ago, where most of us are living on somebody else's land and are beholden to them for everything. And we have no ownership and no power. They were called serfs or peasants or whatever. I could imagine that happening if I don't put on my cheerful cap.
So I just wanted to say, I've been working in tax credit, low income, senior housing. I've been working in that for about 8 years now. And one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of people who come into affordable housing, they have just enough to pay their rent, but then not additional expenses. And because they don't have enough, now they're forced in these positions to determine, okay, do I pay rent? Do I get medicine? Do I take my child to school and pay for what they need? Do I pay my car note? And I have a lot of people that are dealing with those type of situations. Even now, unfortunately, we have about 20 people facing evictions because they have fell on hard times. So that's something that I think, along with needing more public housing, is also the resources to assist these people financially, that once they come into public housing, how can they stay with this safety net of having a roof over their head? And what do you think that looks like as far as pouring back into the community with that?
And everything you are saying is important, and I don't know enough to answer those questions. And if you all are putting together a committee, you might see if this person is available. I'm not volunteering you for that. You have free will and free choice. But the, it's a complicated problem. And let me show you a couple, 3 slides. We've got about 15 minutes. Let me see where I would go. Alrighty. So we've gone from the notion of public housing, the projects. A lot of the projects got torn down 20, 30 years after they were built because it just, it wasn't good for neighbors. It wasn't great for people who lived in them. It was better than living under a bridge. This is from the Hope 6 project, which is a federal aid effort in the late 90s, early 2000s that allowed Charlotte to reimagine, to rebuild almost all of its large-scale public housing. And this was not a perfect program. The early iterations of that, one Earl Village, some of you may remember that, where they tore down 400 units, they built back 200 low-income units. Don't do that. Well, they were figuring it out. But eventually, in places like Renaissance West, Siegel Point, Arbor Glen, this is Park at Oaklawn, tore the whole Fairview Homes down, built a new neighborhood with mixed income apartments, senior housing, single family homes for people who lived in public housing. And I was just over there for actually a TV interview about the book, and it's coming up on 30 years old. It looks like it was built yesterday. And that's right next to Camp North End. There's new townhouses going up right across the street. And so, we could do that anywhere. And that mixture is kind of where the future is. And it's not some imaginary future in the far distance. It is a future where we already are. What you're looking at there is Bright Walk. Bright Walk is the old Double Oaks low-income housing, which was in such bad shape. It was privately owned. It's weird, but I talk about it in the book. That most of the units were uninhabitable. 2005, bank foreclosed on it. Dream Key Partners, which is the nonprofit here in Charlotte, you got to know about them if you put that committee together, said, okay, we'll take everybody, we'll move them out, we'll pay their rent as long as we need to, clear out the neighborhood, build a mixture of apartments, single family homes, and townhouses. And the apartments will always be affordable housing. And that's what you're looking at. If you look at here, you can see the apartments at the top there. You can see some of the single family homes. This is a mile from downtown. And prices in the single family homes are going up like crazy, just like they are all over Charlotte. And so the notion that not in my backyard, that it'll be ugly, that it'll be unsafe, that it'll be, that'll hurt your property values, Bright Walk proves otherwise. Yes, very much mixed income. And y'all have heard of South Park Mall, right? That's considered a pretty good neighborhood in Charlotte. Well, right across the street is mixed income housing. This is owned by Inlivian in partnership with Peter Pappas. Some of you may know him as a major developer. And to orient you, Nordstrom's is over here. This is the Whole Foods Market. This is a new street called Ashley Park Lane. Here is market rate apartments and low-income apartments. Here is low-income senior apartments. Wow. And it has not hurt the desirability of South Park. we could do this anywhere.
Where do you see openings for congregations like Covenant or others to ethically engage in this problem in a meaningful way?
Well, that's going to point me to this thing I've been holding off and not talking about. But one is to familiarize yourself with what's going on. And you don't have to know about all of it because nobody does. This is so complicated that there is no book that gives all of the answers. I've talked to a whole bunch of people in Charlotte who know a lot of the pieces, but they don't know it all. And so whatever you familiarize yourself with, you will be a service to your community just by knowing some things, just by being able to follow stuff in the newspaper. And so, that's one level. But another level is to be aware of the financial stuff that's going on. There are two main ways that affordable housing happens now. Public housing is still there, kind of. But the two main ways, one is Section 8, which is housing choice vouchers. The tenant can afford $300 a month rent. That's 30% of their income. And it's much more than that. And so the federal government gives the landlord the difference between what the tenant can pay and everything else. Section 8, housing choice vouchers. So that's one thing to have your ears up about. The other is the low-income housing tax credit, which is what helps developers who are going to build new stuff. When you guys did the mezzanine development out on Freedom Drive, you partnered with developers who got the low-income housing tax credit. And both of those things are in play right now in Washington. The big, beautiful bill that was passed in July called, the run-up to it called for sharply curtailing vouchers. And what was passed and signed into law by President Trump in July cut the budget of HUD, Housing and Urban Development, by what I've read a number of figures, but the one that shows up most often is 43%. Whether that will mean a direct cut to Section 8 vouchers of 43%, or whether it'll cut the people who actually give you the vouchers and so they don't come to work anymore and you can't get a voucher. But I don't know. Who knows? And because the government's been shut down and all of that, there have not been details coming forth. The low-income housing tax credit, interestingly, the run-up called for expanding that. Really? And they did. 12.5% increase in low-income housing tax credits. Yay! So it is possible, even in the current thing in Washington, if you pitch it right. It may have helped that Donald Trump and his dad, Fred Trump, were champion builders of low-income housing using all these tax breaks. And so they know what's going on here, and they have evidently safeguarded it. So knowing about those things and calling your elected official, that's useful. Yes. 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 Yeah. Yeah. And that's partly that one-by-one thing. And so that brings me to something that people keep telling me when I am giving these talks. People actually think this has been passed here in Charlotte, and it hasn't, but it could be. When building any new project, what if we required developers to include affordable units? Say you're building 10 new units, the developer needs to provide one unit affordable at 30% AMI, one unit at 60% AMI. And could that happen? Well, it actually does happen, just not in North Carolina. There's a name for it. It's called inclusionary zoning. And I have been told that it's illegal in North Carolina, and that's not true. It is just not enabled by Raleigh. Raleigh, anything we want to do as a city, Raleigh has to enable it. This is called the Dillon Rule. And they haven't never enabled it. Davidson has that clause, an inclusionary zoning clause, in their legal framework for building houses. And they said, well, we may lose in court, but if we put the language in there, we give notice to developers that that's what we would like as a community. They're coming into our community, give them notice of that. And so, there's some wiggle room here. What's needed is for folks to get together and talk to your folks in Raleigh. And I don't think you have to ask them for this cockamamie thing. Just ask them, as we did with the transportation bonds, for permission to vote as a community on whether we want inclusionary zoning or not. And I can't read Raleigh, but you all can. There's some people here who know that set of folks real well. And that would be a thing to put some effort in. It would immediately begin to address problems in every part of the city, because we're building in every part of the city. When I say we're building, developers are building in every part of the city. And I can immediately hear socialism, it'll ruin the property value, all of this stuff. And I go back to the women who got the privies to go away. What they did was to work with the real estate leaders and say, we will not be a good, healthy community unless we have this input, unless the developers got out front. The Realtor Standard House Ordinance is what they called it. And they demanded that everyone who developed in Charlotte put in plumbing. And what it did was to take the onus off of a particular developer. And what it also did was to actually, the developers pass that cost along, just like they pass along the cost of the bathrooms. And so all of us, we don't even think about it. We pay a little bit more because all of our homes have bathrooms and many other things under the building codes. We could add affordable housing to that if we wanted to.
I think we're almost at time, so I'm going to ask you one simple last question. What is giving you hope right now when you look at the landscape in Charlotte?
Y'all here? That's a good thing. All of us who voted for the housing bonds, they pass by a larger margin than anything else every time, which means that we haven't asked for enough. You go to your boss and you say, can I have a raise of $10 an hour? And your boss goes, sure. And you go, I didn't ask for enough. Right? Right? So that gives me hope. There are people, a lot of them, who want this. And it's not like we're out in front of the rest of the United States. There are 9 states that do this. There are dozens and dozens of communities that do the inclusionary zoning. And I'm not saying that we should all march down to Raleigh right now, but if you do put together some kind of committee, it's one of the things to think about.
Well, thank you for being here. Can y'all help me thank Tom for all this time with us?
By the way, I have some books here, not very expensive. There's a discount, $25 for the older Charlotte history book, and then, I'm sorry, $20 for the older Charlotte history book and $25 for the affordable housing book.
And I'm sure if y'all had any burning questions you didn't get to ask, that Tom will be here for a couple of minutes. At least,
I would love to be here.
We got to take down your awesome
Yeah.
display here. So, all right, thank you.
Great. Thank y'all.